All right. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. Thanks for the wave, Foy. Well, we have a really cool panel today. I'm so glad to see such a good turnout because this is an important topic. Let's do some reminders real quick. Um, if you haven't downloaded the app, please do so, and remember to fill out the survey at the end. We'd love to hear from you. We want to know what you thought of this session. We want to keep improving. And let's go ahead and dive in. There are more things, but I don't want to read them. All right, everyone. Welcome to an inclusive approach to creating career pathways to the industry. I'm Hillary Wicks. If you haven't met me, I work for America Outdoors. I am the marketing and events manager. And so if you have any feedback, you can also find me in the halls. I also participate on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for America Outdoors. If any of you in this room are interested in getting more involved, we'd love to have you. We get together and talk about how we can make the outdoors and the outfitter industry more inclusive, and we'd love to have more voices. So it's my pleasure today to welcome our panelists, Les Duncan, Lydia Parker, Naquena Moore, and Alex Bailey. And of course, right here, I've got Jerry James. I approached Jerry about this panel for a few reasons. First, his work with Together Outdoors has been really inspiring for me. It's been a standout for me in this space in the outdoor industry. It's been kind of a North Star, actually. And so I also encourage you to look up Together Outdoors because I think it would help outfitter businesses as well. Second, when I thought about career pathways for the industry or a pipeline to this industry, there are a lot of conversations around it, but I noticed there weren't a lot that were focused on outfitter and guides, at least not that I was aware of. That said, I knew that there were people working on it. And so I wanted to try to find those people and bring them together and help us start this conversation. And so, cue the panelists, cue Jerry. I said, hey, come help us out. Come educate us on what's happening. But it's not just about what's happening that you can tap into, it's also about where there are opportunities for partnership. So we're going to get into all that today. I'm going to let them talk about it. And I am here to listen and learn just as you all are. So thank you, everyone, for being here to participate. The panelists will be taking questions at the end. So go ahead and jot them down as you have them, because we have reserved about 10 or 15 minutes for that. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Jerry. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, so big ups to Hillary for reaching out to me for this panel. A lot of my work, I've been working in the outdoor field since I was like a kid, working as a recreational aide, Lake Omer Thomas in Oklahoma. I worked at a small gear store on Fort Sill, Oklahoma, called Patriot Outfitters, and then I was in the Air Force as well. And so like outdoors have been my life and some of the only things I could do living as a military kid, because I couldn't just go off the base to the mall. And so, you know, growing up, like I had like privilege in the sense of like a lot of folks of color don't have access to, you know, high quality outdoor recreation facilities, but I did. And so like I noticed, you know, like there's a lack of diversity in the field and stuff like that. The other piece was like I didn't know when I was a kid that it was a field. I just saw it as like, oh, this is a summer job, rec job, cool gear. I can buy ghillie suits and stuff like that, Heckler and Koch knives and whatever. But I didn't know that I could actually have a career in it. And so fast forward, you know, now like in early 30s, and I've, you know, I do stuff. I work with the EPA. I do like a lot of recreation planning and trail building and stuff like that. And so my kind of like goal has been to kind of have a pedagogy around diversifying the conservation, environmental justice, outdoor fields. And so these panelists here, they represent, you know, when me and Hillary sat down to like assemble the panel, they represent a diverse swath of like what we think can be those entry points to get, you know, underrepresented folks into the industry. And so you're looking at here academia, experiential education. You're also looking at conservation, foundations, and stuff like that. So these folks have a lot of wealth of knowledge, and this is what this panel is about talking about that stuff. And just a little bit about, I just want to shout out Hillary again and American Outdoors. So Together Outdoors is a program under Outdoor Recreation Roundtable that promotes safe and welcoming outdoor experiences. And so AO is part of ORR's, one of ORR's trade associations. And so they've been really one of the stronger folks that have been participating in like our work and stuff. And so just want to thank you, Hillary, thank you, American Outdoors, for having us here and stuff. So I'm gonna go sit down and I'm gonna transition. See if I can be smooth and flip this mic. Can y'all hear me? Test, test. There we go. All right, so we're gonna do some like introductions. So we'll start at the very beginning. A very good place to start with Naquena Moore.
Well, thank you. Well, hello everyone. Let me use the mic. Hello everyone. My name is Naquena Moore. I use she/her pronouns. I am the assistant director at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I do a lot of things. So I currently oversee our 9 differently culturally based organizations, student organizations. So that's our Asian American Association, our Latin American Association, our Native American Association, and various other organizations. I also do assessment in our office and just all other duties as assigned. I'm also an outdoor leader in Knoxville. I'm a part of Outdoor Afro in Knoxville. And I also, on the side, I also work at REI in Knoxville. So, right, where do I have time? I don't. So I do a lot of things because I actually really do love the outdoors. It wasn't until like 2017 that I actually got outdoors. Like this was a thing. So I did my first hike in the Smokies, and ever since then, it was like, oh, I want more of this. And then as I leveled up in my position, I was like, how can I get students outdoors? How can I get more students of color in the outdoors? And so I started working with our rec department and our outdoor program, and now we're doing like really intentional programming to get students of color in the outdoors and in the outdoor field.
Sego Sewagwego, Wakanuradu and Lydia Katz. Hi everyone, my name is Lydia. I'm from the Walker Mohawk Band of the Six Nations of the Grand River, Ganyankeaka, or more commonly known as just Mohawk. And I'm honored to be here today. Thank you so much, Jerry and Hillary and the entire conference for having us. I'm the executive director of Hunters of Color, and we help people of color get into the outdoors through hunting, fishing, conservation, for the purpose of connecting to ancestral traditions, sustainable food sources, and just a way to enjoy the outdoors and to recreate. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service most recent study, which was in 2016, less than 4% of all hunters identify as people of color. And our goal and our mission is to create a hunting community that reflects the diversity of our country. And our job in that, we believe, is to create what we call surrogate families. I was talking to Naquena earlier about how hard it is to get into anything if you don't know people, you know, in that. If it's kayaking, if it's fishing, if it's hunting, whatever it is, if you don't know people, if your family isn't involved, if your friends aren't involved, it can be really, really challenging. And so we create surrogate families through our mentorship program, which is now active in 12 states. And we're about to surpass 1,000 hunters this year, new hunters, people of color in the outdoors. So thank you all for having me, and looking forward to answering some questions.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I kind of like call and response. Good morning, everyone. There you go. Good morning. My name is Lesford Duncan. I'm the CEO of Greening Youth Foundation. But most importantly, I'm an adventurer. I'm a lover of the outdoors. I'm a kayaker, mountaineer, ultramarathon runner, and just lover of people and community and Black boy joy in the outdoors. That is fortunate to have the opportunity to help lead a phenomenal nonprofit based in Atlanta called the Greening Youth Foundation that's working to cultivate the next generation of more diverse environmental leaders, conservationists, environmental justice champions, sustainability champions. And so we do that through connecting youth, not only connecting youth to nature through environmental education and outdoor recreation, but also through workforce development as well, in partnership with the National Park Service, the Forest Service, federal agencies, local agencies, and community-based organizations. And then one of my other hats is as a board member of the Outdoor Foundation, the philanthropic arm of the Outdoor Industry Association. And the Outdoor Foundation has been working over the past 3 years through the Thrive Outside initiative to increase meaningful access to the outdoors for youth that have been historically excluded. I like to change it up sometimes and not just use underrepresented, but actually acknowledge that the exclusion part of it and how youth or how communities of color have been proactively excluded from the outdoors, whether it be through redlining, racist practices, racist land management practices, to media representation and outreach today. And so I'm excited to talk more about that during this discussion today.
This one, does it work? Okay. Man, you said it all. That was great. We're done here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. Hey, y'all. Good morning. My name is Alex Howdy from Texas. I am the proud founder and executive director of amazing nonprofit and community Black Outside Inc., where our mission is to reconnect Black youth to the outdoors. We're intentional about that word reconnect, acknowledging that Black folks, at least in the United States, have had a really powerful and deep history in the outdoors, and a lot of times, as Les has mentioned already, a lot of times those stories aren't uplifted. I'm a former high school teacher. Shout out to any educators in the room. There's some, hey, they're like, well, I'm here, not there. No, I'm just kidding. Love the classroom, love the kids. It's the adults, right, as we know. But yeah, as a former high school teacher, I taught in Title I schools, our economically under-resourced neighborhoods, and really saw how youth of color systemically are excluded from nature programming and outdoors in a lot of our, especially our urban schools. And so that was one of the things that moved me to found the organization. We were launched in 2019, and we've served over 500 plus Black youth across Central Texas and around the U.S. Through our 3 programs. One proud program that we do have, thinking about the history, is America's first historically Black summer camp for girls, started in our home city of San Antonio in 1924. And we proudly revived that program in 2019, and that's our largest program with over 150 Black girls that get to experience nature and the outdoors for 1 week. So super excited for this opportunity to talk.
Awesome, great. Thanks for those intros. So I talked a little bit about me, and I'm just gonna share in from my guiding context. So I am a paddle sports instructor as well. So I am certified in SUP, kayak and canoeing through the ACA. I've done a lot of work with the ACA, helped them get their some grant programs. We created a new curriculum called the Community Paddle Sports Leadership, or Community Paddle Sports Leader certification. And so I've worked at outfitters and been around the industry for a while. But what I want to kind of segue into and ask our panelists is, how did you get into this field? And I'll just say for me, how I got more into the guiding or the outfitting type thing was, I was obsessed with stand-up paddleboarding. I wanted to work at this a summer camp called Pine Cove, if y'all have heard of it, in Texas. And so I was Googling for a unique summer internship, media internship, because I studied communications and environmental science. And so I Googled cool media internship, outdoor program, and Pine Cove came up. And so I got the job, went to Texas and stuff like that. And I spent the summer, shooting photos of kids horseback riding and archery, all that stuff. And then we went to Waco, Texas, and people were paddleboarding, and we rented boards. And I was like, man, this is amazing. And I loved it because I grew up swimming and canoeing and stuff. And so it pursued me. I was just singularly obsessed with it. And so then I decided, I want to teach this. I want to get people more into the sports. So I looked at the ACA, found out about it, got my cert and everything. But it was really hard for me, early 20s, to afford to go do the training. It was expensive. Go to Florida where it was and stuff. But then I did it, and then that's how I kind of got here and got it more of a career. And also I started a small social enterprise when I was in college called Explore Kentucky that promotes outdoor recreation around the state. And that pathway, for me, it was just kind of stumbling upon it. And so I want to ask our panelists, how did you, for my story, for me, stumbling upon it, through camp, also for me, starting a small social enterprise because I wanted to promote our state. How'd you get into the outdoor field?
Is it still on? Okay. I'm glad that you asked that question and that you talked about starting the initiative that you started in college, because that's kind of how Hunters of Color came to be. I did not grow up hunting, and actually, out of all of our board members and all of our staff, only one person learned how to hunt as a kid from their own family. And so I'm kind of one of many people of color who have not had the opportunity to learn from family members because they're not hunting. My dad grew up in a city, not on the reservation, and didn't have access to hunting there that other family members would have. And so anyways, one generation removed, as I was talking about, I didn't know who to learn from and how to learn until I met our other two co-founders, Jimmy Flatt and Thomas Tyner. And they both kind of took me under their wing as a proof of concept and said, hey, if we can teach you how to hunt, me with all my ADHD and all my lack of focus and everything, if we can teach you how to hunt, we can teach anybody how to hunt. And so they did, they took me under their wing, and that was almost 5 years ago now. And for me, it took other people starting initiatives. It took Thomas and Jimmy sitting down and saying, hey, this is something that needs to change. Jimmy is an engineer by trade, one of our other co-founders, and he looked at the numbers and he was like, oh wait, this doesn't reflect the United States at all. There's obviously steps that need to be taken here to create equity in the outdoors. And when Jimmy and Thomas were talking about it, they talked about it and talked about it, and so I finally actually took the initiative and said, hey, stop talking about it and do something. You know, you can talk about it all you want, but you need to take action. So I actually bought them their website domain and social media and everything like that, and gave it to them and said, do what you will with this, and then they went and hired me on accident, so now here I am. But anyways, that's kind of a roundabout story to say, like, it takes other people who are willing to help, but it also takes initiative from people who are maybe you don't feel like an expert, and that's where I was, but here I am.
So like I said, so I grew up, born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but raised in Michigan. And so my father's side is still in Tennessee, but it was not until 2017, like I said, that I did my very first hike. And so then from there, in my job, I worked in our agricultural department. And so I met up with a couple of friends, and we actually, in 2019, we took a trip to South Dakota. And so we drove from Tennessee to South Dakota, on a whim. She was like, just get in the car, get your stuff, let's go. And so we went camping in Custer Park. And so that was the very first time I've ever camped. And I was just exposed to a lot of things. And so I think that's when, like, the bug hit me. And from there, one of my friends was like, I think you should apply to be a leader. And I'm like, I don't know anything about the outdoors. This is all new to me. I just went camping. And she's like, no, I think you're a good leader. I think you could do this. And, like, you like event planning. That's what they do. And so I went ahead and applied. I had never did one of their events or anything. I applied, and then I became the first leader in Knoxville. And from there, this is now my second year, been leading events out in Knoxville. But from there, I was like, I do want to do this in my job. How can I marry, like, education and outdoors in my job? And so I would just been trying to think of things to do that. And so that's why I was, like, really pursuing our outdoor program and just trying to find ways that our students can get connected. And so right now it's just really learning. And then this summer, how I met Jerry this summer, I did a paddling academy this summer. I had never been on the water, never paddleboard, kayak, nothing, my first time. And then I was exposed to that. And so I'm like, if I am now a lady of my 40s, if I can be a person in my 40s just now learning all these things, I really want my students to, as they're younger, to, like, do these things now and learn about it. But it's just the exposure, the education, the awareness. They don't know about these things. So really quick, fun story. We have a climbing wall at the university, and this was, like, a really intentional program. They had a BIPOC night, and so they were like, bring your students. So I took about 5 students with me, and they had never climbed before. And so when we got there, they were like, no, I'm not gonna climb, I'm not gonna do it. So I went ahead and did it, and they're like, still, nope, we're not gonna do that. I'm like, no, come on. And so then I got one student to do it, and then we kept hanging out. By the end of the night, all of the students climbed the wall. And so the thing is that I told them, I was like, they had never been there before. It's on campus, they have access to it, it's free to them, But the thing is, they weren't aware of it. They didn't know it was there. But now that they know it's there, we're going to go back again. We're going to do intentional programming there to get more students to go there so they can do and so they can climb that wall.
I think very similar to the stories that were shared before. Growing up, I too didn't really consider myself outdoorsy, even though I loved the outdoors. Notice the nuance there. I loved getting out, riding my bike. I loved camping. We had an annual camping trip that our church did each year that I absolutely enjoyed, but still never considered myself an outdoors person, right? Like it didn't feel embedded into our lifestyle. It didn't into my family's lifestyle. Even though, ironically, I was born to two Jamaican parents. My dad, fun fact that I found out maybe a few years ago is that my dad was actually a youth camp leader when he was younger. I dug up some pictures out of an old photo album. I'm like, Dad, you literally do what I've been wanting to do. But it's interesting how you can grow up interested in and curious about nature and still not feel connected to kind of this concept of being outdoorsy because of the messages that you're told about who belongs in those spaces, who does those types of activities. Just a quick story kind of on that. I remember, so I was a track runner all throughout high school, and we had a group of us that we called the Trackies. We thought we were the coolest kids on campus. We didn't have a football team, a varsity football team throughout my time in high school, so we were the jocks, if you can imagine that. And we did everything together. We hung out together, we went out together on weekends and everything. And I remember one week, I want to say it was spring break, a group of my friends left out of town and went on a backpacking trip. They came back and they were sharing stories about it and everything. And I was like, how come y'all didn't invite me on that? And my friend shared with me, and he shared it in all sincerity. He was like, I didn't think you'd want to do that. I didn't think you were into that type of stuff, that Black people did that. And said that flat out, right? Like, I mean, this was the 90s. That was probably a different time. People wouldn't say that, although people might still believe that today. But there was this notion of like, you don't really belong in these spaces. That I remember getting that message early on. And the defiant personality in me was like, oh no, I'm gonna be in those spaces. Fast forward, now I've mountaineered around the world, and that same friend reached out to me. He was like, yeah, I never would have known you'd have been an ultramarathon runner and visiting all of these spaces. So I grew up without that connection to the outdoors. I actually came into this field first by working in youth development, behavioral health, child welfare, and working with kids that had experienced tremendous trauma and loss, very similar to some of the trauma that I had experienced in childhood as well, and that were going through the foster care system, going through the juvenile justice system, the behavioral health system, without any antidotes to what it was that was afflicting them. And at the same time, I had just moved out to California, was really exploring my inner outdoorsman, and wanted to really introduce them to that opportunity as well. And so took small groups of youth out hiking with me and just saw the immediate healing effects of being in the outdoors on many of these youth. Partnered with an amazing nonprofit in San Diego called Outdoor Outreach, and then eventually joined on staff with Outdoor Outreach, and made it my life's purpose to help build resilience and well-being and joy in kids through experiences in the outdoors. So that was kind of my long roundabout story into this field. Alex has probably heard me talk way too much. We've done too many of these panels together.
No, I learned something new. I never heard that backpacking story. Dang, that was messed up. Like, no, you don't belong here. So anyway, well, let's see. So I'm originally from Ohio. We don't have to talk about that. Last Saturday. It was a rough Saturday. But I'm originally from Ohio, and my grandfather was a gardener. He was the director of the largest community garden and botanical garden in our small town of Mansfield, Ohio. for over 25 years. If you went to his house, in the 70s, 80s, all the way up to the 90s, you would arrive at his house and you would see these beautiful roses all over the front of the house. You would see in the back he grew tomatoes, he grew mint tea leaves and would make like natural organic mint teas. Just these beautiful like array of floral things, and he did it for fun. So he had this deep connection to the land. I share that piece because I would spend my summers with my grandfather, and I remember my hands touching the dirt with him. I remember us literally like chucking corn together on our steps. But the irony of that is, in those times, you would only see my grandfather, now you wouldn't see my grandmother. And my grandmother had a pretty tragic story in the outdoors around sexual assault when she was younger, and was the reason why she moved to Ohio. So I share those two pieces because in me, I carry this really dichotomy of outdoor experience that I think really represents, for some, not all, for some black folks in America, of like this fear and this real fear of being outdoors, right? And at the same time, this deep connection that many people wouldn't acknowledge, right? People wouldn't acknowledge that my grandfather was an outdoorsman. He knew so much, like he can name every single tree and everything in a lot of different instances. So I had that history, and then similar to you, Les, if someone had asked me in high school, like, do you have a connection to the outdoors? I'd be like, no, I mean, I play football, like, whatever. Put my hand in the dirt, that's what I do, right? And I would say no pretty quickly. And so how I felt like I fostered a reconnection in an intentional way to the outdoors was similar to you through summer camp. I had the opportunity to work at one of the top summer camps in the Northeast. In New Hampshire. Because of my football background, it was a sports camp, but it was a 7-week sports camp, all boys. It was chaos, as you can imagine. I just see some people nodding their heads like, what? Yeah, we had 7 weeks outdoors, summer camp in the mountains, in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And I'll never forget my first time going. I'd never been to New Hampshire before. They recruited me in to like coach flag football. And I just remember the first day waking up and looking out at the White Mountains and almost crying when I was 18. And I was like, I have never seen something like this beautiful in my life, And that summer, outside of sports, we got to take the kids kayaking. We went on an overnight canoe trip. We went on a big camp out trip and big hike. And during one of those big hikes, we have the chance to jump off this like waterfall into the river. It's like a 12-foot drop. Insurance people don't knock them. Yeah, no, they're like, what? What's the liability for them for that, right? But yeah, all that to say, I remember my last year. I worked there for 3 summers. It was really, really powerful. I'm still connected to a lot of my campers. And that last year there, I did the jump, and my kids would champ me on, and I get out the water, and I remember I looked around, and I was like, this was so cool, but none of these kids look like me, And I thought about that moment always stayed with me. And when I was a high school teacher, I again saw how like there was this huge disconnection. I always wished so many of my kids could go to that camp or work at a camp like that just to experience the outdoors, especially our kids that were experiencing some really, really hardships in their community and their family. So, that was my deep connection is summer camp, and then later like the education piece. And the last tidbit I will share that really pushed me to launch Black Outside was I was actually a leadership coach in schools, and I had the opportunity to see like 30+ schools in San Antonio and coach teachers there. And I was in a school in our historically black neighborhood on the east side, and it was an elementary school, predominantly black school. And this teacher that I was working with was extremely distraught at the end of the day when I met with her. And I just finally asked her, I was like, is everything okay? And she said, my heart's just broken. Our kids only get 8 minutes of recess a day. And I was like, what? And she said, why? And she's like, yeah, my 4th graders only get 8 minutes of recess because the school said they have to focus on math intervention and math instruction. And I was like incensed, sure. But I was just like, this would not fly. Like the fact that you're not even treating our youth like humans. I mean, in our carceral system, people get more time outdoors than that. And these are 8 and 9-year-old kids. And then they were like, well, we don't understand why they're not focusing in class. I'm like, well, you have them sitting, a 9-year-old sitting in a seat all day. How would you feel if you just had to sit in the same place? So that was the last experience that really pushed me. And I share that to say I think the education system plays a huge role in perpetuating some of these inequities around outdoor exploration and inclusion.
Well, thank y'all. So like just pulling out some themes for y'all. So you see from a lot of y'all represent like outfitters. So there's in HR folks from these companies. So there's barriers, right? So there's already that thought of like before I even apply, do I belong here? that's a big thing. You know, like all of us, you know, I've outdoorsy, but like, you know, I'll be honest, like it wasn't until a few years ago that I felt like I was like him. Like I was like that outdoor person. Even though I've been like an outdoorsy person, been in the outdoors, done a lot of cool stuff, 100-mile, you know, paddle expeditions and stuff like that. But it was just because of like the way that from marketing, you know, like you look at marketing materials, it's predominantly white people, able-bodied folks, and then also the way that people talk about it and stuff. And so that's just something that I want to like point out to y'all is like that's a barrier right there. Is like to getting people to apply is just not feeling like they belong. The other piece is just that access, you know, early on, you know, through families and stuff. And so what I want to kind of segue into the next like kind of question, and 'cause all y'all represent different pieces to get people, you know, get kids, get youth, get folks into the industry. I'm gonna start off with Naquena. So Naquena, from like a, you know, a post-secondary institution, a university, what are the mechanisms to get folks, you know, get your students to these folks? You know, Upper Canyon Outfitters. How can you get folks there, you know, and stuff?
Yeah, I would say coming to the institution. So if we could have like a fair or a program, the thing is getting you all in front of the students so they know they have this opportunity and they can learn and ask questions. Because the thing is that what I find is students don't seek this out because they don't know that it's even an opportunity. And so I think bringing you all to our students. I am in the position to where I do contracts for our department, to where I can have different people come to our institution and speak to our students. And so that would be a great way to have you all come out and just talk to the students, talk about jobs, talk about the industry, talk about just different things. And because, I mean, they just need to know that. I think another thing too is that they also want to know, like, if they were to, like, maybe get a job or get an internship or even volunteer at your company, will they feel safe? Will they feel listened to, valued, and respected? Or are they going to feel like they're just being tokenized? Is it just something on, like, a checklist? Or is what you're doing more multiculturally competent? Like, are you changing policies, procedures? What does that look like? Because a lot of times, I have about 5 ag students that I'm still talking to that are getting ready to graduate, and that's their questions. They just recently did internships, and one of my students was like, I went to this company and I talked to the CEO, and I told him, I'm like, where's the diversity? And she is a Hispanic young lady, and she's like, I did not feel like there were other people that look like me that worked there. I don't know if I'm gonna work for that company. I enjoyed the experience, but I don't know if I can work for that company in the future because they're not valuing diversity. They say they do, but they're not really doing it, And so that's what they're looking at. And so, I just looking at your policies and your procedures and seeing how you can really value diversity in that.
We're just going down the
Whoever
line.
wants
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Naquena, saying, looking at your own policies, your own procedures, because I believe it does start with each one of us individually, but also from a company's perspective, there are ways that you can educate yourselves and your team so that we don't feel like we're having to teach you the basics when we come out and we're just trying to enjoy the outdoors. And so I think that that's huge. That's one clear way to build trust. And I think that that's the word that I'm just sticking with is trust. Intentionality. We can tell when we're a box that needs to be checked, and there's so much different. It feels so different than to instead feel welcome in a space, feel safe in a space when we know that the people that we're working with have done the work to make sure. We always talk about how what we do in hunting and conservation, wildlife management, one of the things is when you're trying to reintroduce an extirpated species. So say the Tule elk in the Bay Area of California, when the elk used to be some 500,000 head strong, there's now less than 5,000 of the Tule elk. But if we were to try to reintroduce them right now in the Bay Area, they're not gonna eat very well on the wine grapes in Sonoma and Napa. And so you have to create an environment where those animals can thrive, coming back to where they're from. So it's not like introducing them for the first time. It's their home, and just like elk, we belong in the outdoors as well. But we need environments where we can thrive and where we know that we're going to be safe. And then last thing I'll say about that, the trust aspect is in trusting the communities in which community organization, let me start over. Trust that the people in the communities know how to work with their communities. This means that you don't have to go start a new initiative to try to bring people into whatever guiding service you do. Go find the community organizations that are already doing that work, because they're entrenched in the community. They've been facing what that community is facing. And once you invest in those organizations and those people, the leaders within those communities, that's when you'll start bringing people into the fold, because they'll see that you trust the communities. They see the donations. One of the examples that we always use is Onyx Maps. I'm sure all of y'all are familiar with Onyx. Great supporter of Hunters of Color, and they now have over 1,000 brand loyal people who use their maps because they supported our organization. They donated memberships for our mentees in our mentorship program, and now the communities that we work with can trust them because they know that we trust them and they trust us to do the work. So anyways, I'll get off the soapbox.
Not a soapbox. Not a soapbox at all. It's funny, actually. Lydia wrote down trust on her paper. I wrote down relationship and then peeked over at her notes and was like, all right, cool. This is going to segue really well. It's all about relationship. It's all about relationship. It's all about relationship. In 2020, when America went through its racial awakening and everyone put up their black squares and everything, there were so many kind of efforts and initiatives and questions and panels that all of us have been on that were asking the same questions around, how do we increase diversity within our workforce? How do we increase diversity within our customer base? And it all comes down to relationship. So many organizations, and it was interesting, I was reading an article that talked about kind of assessing organizations that did a hard diversity push in 2020 and went out to recruit Black and brown people onto staff in order to increase diversity and change and shift their numbers, and looking at now kind of where those companies are at 2 years later. Because those companies often worked at kind of the surface level of how do we increase diversity, let's get a token Black person into this marketing position so that we show our commitment to diversity. Many of those same companies now are wondering, all right, well, why aren't we able to retain people of color in these spaces? Why aren't we able to retain our communities of color within our customer bases? And it's because it wasn't rooted in relationship. It was rooted in transaction, right? If what looks like a win to you is checking the box and saying I hired this one Black person on staff, or I took out this one group for on this trip and created a great photo op out of it, then you miss it. You miss the opportunity for depth of experience. I wanted to call out just a specific example, and not just because he's in the room, but literally because, and I've been raising your name throughout this week, Greg McFadden. Greg, actually, could you raise your hand real quick? Just want to point at this guy. He didn't ask me to do this. I'm thoroughly enjoying embarrassing you right now. With Canyon Rivers Company. Earlier this year, we partnered with Canyon Rivers Company, Greening Youth Foundation, to do a paddling trip down the Salmon River in Idaho, and to see how that partnership came about. That was representative of the relationship that I'm talking about. I think Greg got in contact with one of our team members probably 2.5 years ago, and just said, "Hey, what's up? We have a rafting outfitter, and we'd love to bring you out on the river at some point. Let's see how we can make it happen." And the conversations went back and forth, and the pandemic happened, but the relationship was built. where by the time we actually got to making the trip finally happen, it was so thoughtful, so intentional. I still to this day, I've traveled and I've done kayaking trips and mountaineering trips all around the world and have been on many guided trips. And that still resonates as the most impactful, most thoughtful, most intentional trip because of the amount of work that went into getting to know all of the folks that were going to be on that trip, taking the time to build a relationship, not looking for a transactional, not coming in with, hey, can we, how can we present this on social media, or how can we talk about this afterwards, or, what funding opportunities are. It was just, how can we get you out to the river? We don't have communities of color out here, or often using the Salmon River, and it would just be great to have you in the space and to break bread together. Specifically, and I'll shut up, specifically kind of that whole trip summarized was one morning I woke up, I was up early, I think like 6:37, and Margot, one of the guides, came out and just passed by and said, hey, do you want some coffee? I was just sitting there watching the sunrise. And I was like, yeah, that would be nice. And she brought it out and we sat and we talked. And just, it was authentic. It was real, right? Like it didn't feel like a checked box. So I just wanted to bring that up as a case scenario, and just highly encourage y'all. If you don't know Greg, get to know Greg. He's awesome. And he didn't pay me at all to say any of that.
I was going to say something really fast, so you notice like what folks talked about with, it wasn't jumping necessarily to like the job, getting people into the, so like just an example, you start off with some introductory trips, reach out to, there's local nonprofits, the Urban League, there's all kinds of groups, Outdoor Afro, so you could be just reaching out to do those introductory trips, and those seeds will like grow into something years later. But Alex, go ahead. I'm really curious, particularly for you, Black Outside, like what's that pipeline like to get folks, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start off with a quick story, and then from that extrapolate some like things that really stand out from the story. So there's a young man, Darius, who's actually dog sitting my dogs right now. So send them love. Young man Darius, he was on our first camping trip back in 2019. Darius had never been to a Texas state park. He had never went camping. He and his twin sister, are the first ones in their first ones in their household to go and attend college. He's re-enrolling right now at Texas Southern University, HBCU. So he had never, for him, he played football, but he was just like, outdoors not a thing. We took him on his first camping trip. He loved it. So he loved it so much, like he was lactose intolerant and still like started drinking milk and just experienced it, like that's how much he loved it. Right? We didn't find out till like day 3. I'm like, are you okay? But he wanted to stay out there, And so Darius, fast forward in the summer of 2021, I got a call from my former camp director that I worked at when I was in college, and he said, hey, I'm looking for, I need staff, for the summer. I know you, I know your organization. He calls me once a year and we just do a soft check-in with each other, just about life. And he's like, I would be really honored if, maybe you'd offer this opportunity to work at our camp with one of our kids. And I said, look, Jeff, I'm gonna be real. Like your camp's in Pennsylvania. It's a predominantly white camp. My kids most of the kids I work with come from predominantly black communities. Like it's crossing lines of difference. Not that they can't do it, but it's gonna take some work. And Jeff, my camp director, did the work. He said, give me Darius's number, I'm gonna call him. And he called him directly. Darius didn't answer the phone. Called him directly again. Darius didn't answer the phone, right? So there's a theme here. Texted me and said, can you put me in a group text with Darius? And I did, and I told Darius, I was like, Darius, answer this phone, all right? So he did, had a whole hour-long conversation, asked Darius about life, what his interests were, got to know Darius. He built this deep trust capital with him. Fast forward, we're getting ready to, Darius decides, I'm gonna work at this camp. We sell it to him, he's like, fine, I'll do it. I wake up at 5 a.m. to drive him to the Austin airport, which is an hour away, and literally halfway through, up to Austin, he says, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm scared. I don't know these kids. These kids don't know me. Like, what about my background? I can't do it. And like, literally, I'd never seen Darius like this. He's like, pull over the car. I'm not going, Alex. I was like, oh my gosh. So I call Frito. Jeff is his name, but the nickname is Frito. And he goes, Jeff says, okay, I'm going to call Darius again. Calls Darius. He doesn't answer. Calls him again. Has a whole 2-hour conversation. Y'all, this is like 2 days before summer camp training. Like, y'all know how chaotic, some of y'all like how chaotic it is. He literally canceled his meetings, talks to Darius intentionally, connected him with one of his black staff members, and told him, like, we were rebooking your flight. You were, basically was like, dude, we want you here to camp. And Darius has worked there for 2 consecutive summers now and loves it. I share that story because, one, I almost tear up thinking about, like, the work that Jeff did to ensure Darius is in a safe place, and realizing that he had to build this trust capital with this young black boy from the east side of San Antonio who literally grew up in the projects, who had only been outside of the state of Texas once. And you're asking him to fly to Pennsylvania and work with kids? Like, he's like, what? And Darius has had the most fun summers. He went to Niagara Falls this past summer. He went to New York City. He talks so glowingly about this experience. So I share that to say, yes, trust capital is so important. And some things I think I would really push outfitters on, or especially if you're trying to partner to increase diversity, is one, like, you may have to send multiple emails, right? Like, you have to understand a lot of our community organizations, like, we're not just an outdoor organization. I had a kid text me literally earlier yesterday, was like, hey, I need help with scholarships. And yes, I'm going to help them. I have parents that text me like, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. Do you know anyone in our city of San Antonio that can help me pay my bills? Like, we're not just the outdoor organization. So a lot of times, especially organizations working in communities of color, especially along lines of class, are not just doing outdoor program, or not just doing youth service. A lot of times our care is holistic. And so with that, my email inbox is inundated, right? But I'm going to put Shay, and I'm gonna put Crystal, who texted me, first, before my inbox, right? And so, like, you may have to email a couple of times, and I just want to name that's okay. So I would really push y'all to say it's okay to not 2 or 3 times, and not in like a pestering way, but like an open way of like, hey, it's been a couple months, I know you might have been busy, acknowledge the work that folks are doing, and I think some folks, not all, but some folks will really see that care. They're like, oh, they really want to meet, like, let me get on a call with them, right? So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, in that space when Darius went, Jeff positioned himself as a listener. He's been a camp director for 30 years. He was on the board of the American Camp Association, but he positioned himself as a listener and listened to what Darius needed support on. And so I think that's the biggest thing in these environments, right? When especially youth of color, young people of color get in, I think a lot of times, like, we as outdoor leaders, like, we are the holders of all knowledge. I've backpacked through these places. Here's what you do, right? And then, you might have a young black kid that comes in and be like, look, this ain't gonna work if you're trying to work with kids from Chicago, okay? Right, like, here's what we gotta do, right, And so I think, to what extent, I think you would ask yourself the question, to what extent is your leadership positioning itself as listeners for communities of color, right? To what extent is positioning yourself as listeners in communities of color and showing that deep care? And then the last thing I think I'll push and say on is, I will really push y'all to, and we're having this discussion in the camping world, summer camp world right now. I do sessions for the Christian Camp Association and the American Camp Association, and we've really had a really positive discussion about how are we marketing these amazing, like, outfitting jobs and camping jobs to youth. A lot of times it's like, go outside, play with kids, but you're learning so many long-term skills, right? Am I right? You're learning about collaboration. You're learning about curiosity. You're learning about courageousness, right? You're learning about people skills. Yes, like, some of y'all who do, like, marketing software and all those things, yes, like, software can almost do anything, right? But it's the people skills. When you walk on that exhibit floor, let's be real, like, it's not about the software you're marketing. Yes, that's important. It's about the people skills that you can have. So many times, outfitting, guiding, camping jobs cultivate those skills for our youth. So I think that's another piece that's really important. And even Jeff mentioned to Darius, he's like, look, long term, you want to be a social worker. Like, you're going to get so many amazing skills from this. It's not, my goal isn't for you to be a camp director. My goal is to cultivate whatever your long-term passion is. You can have that here. And I think I would really position some outfitting guides and camps and youth serving organizations to say, if you're recruiting youth, don't just think about, oh, we're trying to get you to be a guide for the next 30 years. Maybe it's just like, look, this is only one summer, but you want to work in business, right? You're going to have dinner and fly across the country and meet people you don't know. This is the best opportunity to do that. You can do that in the backcountry and cultivate that relationship and really have practice with that skill. So those are definitely the things that I think are important, is thinking about how you brand and market the opportunity that could potentially cultivate a lot of long-term skills for youth.
Awesome. So, trying to like tie it, thank you. So I guess like let me think of for a second. Why is this like important? You know, that's like why I want to like the next kind of question that I want to kind of go into. What I was trying to like articulate to say is like a lot of y'all might think like, I want to be bold and say this, like it sounds difficult to work with Black and brown populations. It might sound like that. I think that it, but there's a why. You know, a lot of us, like not particularly like not all of us, but a lot of us come from really, you know, traumatic like family situations, and it's a lot because of like systemic racism in our country. You know, even like, you know, Alex was talking about, you know, the kids in like San Antonio coming from predominantly Black neighborhoods, and that lack of integration, that wasn't by they didn't want to do that. That was by government design. You know, redlining. You know, we had to live in those projects and stuff like that. So I just want y'all to know that, acknowledge that these are things that, because of like the way our systemic racism in our country, that we, all of us in this room, we have a responsibility to dismantle. And I know that's like really heady for an outdoor guide outfitter, you know, as you're, you know, juggling insurance and all kinds of things to think about, but you are part of that, you know, that system. And so like what I want to kind of go in with our panelists and ask, like, why is diversity important in the outfitter guide spaces? I'll say the big reason, like for me, is like I'm an environmental person, and so you know, we need like communities of color to be really invested in environmental protection. And so guide and outfitters, y'all are like the front lines, you know, to environmental protection and environmental justice, because y'all get people out on the resource. And so when you get people out on the resource that are diverse, it gets more people to love the outdoors and love protecting the environment. And we need that diversity. The other piece for me is like public health. A lot of communities of color have, you know, really, the public health is not good, you know, from where communities were designed, and like dumps, you know, trash dumps and electrical plants and highways are put in the communities of color intentionally. And so we need folks that are beacons to kind of showcase, like, you know, getting outside and healthiness and environmental protection. So that's really important. But I just want to ask the panelists, like, why is this important? Why is this important to the guides and outfitters, you know, to do it?
I think the answer to this question is pretty simple. It's important because you can't care about something unless you know about it. And so what all of us are doing is introducing people to the things that y'all already love. You're already out there, and we're bringing people to the outdoors so that they can also fall in love with these things. And for that reason, I mean, what Jerry's saying about, you know, conservation, environmental justice, not only are we, you know, creating this love for the outdoors, but when you love something, you want to take care of it, right? And so we're creating the next generation of voters who care about the land and the animals and the ecosystem and the environment, et cetera, and also people who are going to teach their kids to love and care for those things as well. And so I think that that's really my why. I mean, there's so many reasons why, but for y'all, like, that's really important. I say this all the time too. You don't have to like hunting. You don't have to like me. It's totally fine. I expect people not to like me a lot of times, actually. But you do have to care about the planet. You do have to look at the gaps in diversity, or whatever you want to call it, and see who isn't at the table, you know, who wasn't invited to the table, who was told they weren't allowed at the table. And so anyways, inviting those people into your communities after building that environment where we're going to be able to thrive. And so the last thing that I'll leave y'all with, as far as what that actually looks like, because I always, you know, we say do the work, you know, do the trainings, like look at your policies, but what does that look like? Like if you're a CEO or executive director here today, what are you actually going home to do today, you know? But I think that what that can look like to me, and I'd love to hear the other panelists say what they think it looks like too, is hiring an external anti-racism trainer from a community organization that works in the communities that you are a part of. You know, even someone from Outdoor Afro, you know, talking to someone, doing an audit of your policies and of your team and of your culture. And then also training your staff in those things as well. And there are so many, I hate when I hear, oh, I can't find anyone to do this. There are so many Black and brown people who are willing to do that. We have an anti-racism training that we can give to any one of you here if you're interested in that, but especially if you're a leader in your organization, you need to go home and be the one to start that. But anyways, thank you. Why is it important?
Why is it important? I grapple with this because I feel like, especially just over the past couple of years, we've been on so many panels that talk about the why it's important, right? For all of the reasons that were mentioned, for health benefits of the health, the well-being, the resilience of communities, to the economy, to environmental justice, cultivating the next generation of environmental leaders. And I imagine that many of you, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that many of you are in this room because you connect to that why, and you're looking for a lot of the, all right, now how, right? Especially considering that, and maybe kind of another why would, especially considering that, you know, by 2040, demographics or statistics show that collectively our country will be majority minority communities, right? And so that then connects to all of the things that we talked about. Public health. What does public health look like when entire communities are blocked off from access to the outdoors, right? What does environmental justice, what does climate change look like? And what do those conversations look like when our voters, our electorate, our elected officials aren't informed about why the environment is important, and they're so far removed from understanding how pollution leads to sea level rise, right? Like it's when there's that disconnect and our citizenry aren't informed, then that's a huge piece of the why. I think one of the other things that comes to mind, and a note that I wanted to make sure to also put in there as well, is when we talk about cultivating the next generation of more diverse environmental leaders, we're not only talking about just getting Black and brown kids out for the sake of getting Black and brown kids out, and not just thinking about it from a race standpoint, also considering sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, status, and so forth as well. But what we're also thinking about is what's the untapped potential within the industries that we're in, right? How might your introduction of someone to the outdoors in a new or novel way spark curiosity that will help to change and transform fields later on? I think as Alex was mentioning, right, like not everyone is going to go on to become a guide. Not everyone is going to continue to work in outdoor recreation, but now you're bringing in again kind of a different level of innovation and thought into this space as well. And so you all are teachers as you are guides, as much as you are guides as well. So just wanted to kind of throw that thought in there for whatever it provokes.
I'll be super quick. So, I mean, you kind of shared everything that was in my head. I think it's important that, like, our kids, I think from the Black perspective, like, Black youth need to be in these discussions around what care for the earth looks like, uplifting and holding that, like, our communities have been caretakers of the earth for centuries, right? Like my granny used to wash aluminum foil and plastic plates all the time. She was super intentional about that. And my grandfather was a gardener, like very intentional about caring for the earth. So uplifting those stories and also including their voices in the dialogue around that. That's why I think this is so important that, and again, if our kids aren't exposed to these places, it's hard for them to like really reconcile and see the deep connection there. And I think the last thing I'll just kind of answer this from a different angle. Y'all get to see like a freaking amazing, I was gonna say something else. I'll be honest, I can kind of, yeah, all right. Amazing, beautiful places. Like I was mentioning earlier, I've backpacked in the Sawtooth Mountains, I've been to the Arctic Circle, I've been a lot of places. Like, you guys get to see amazing, beautiful places. All humans deserve to see that, and in our country, more communities of color, and especially our kids of color, deserve to see those spaces too.
Absolutely. I agree with everything that y'all have said. And it took me a moment to like get my thoughts together and really get an answer because like I work at the University of Tennessee. This is a predominantly white institution. Only 20% of our students there identify as students of color. And then in our College of Agriculture, only 9% are students of color. And I think about my 5 students that I had from freshman year, now they're getting ready to graduate and go into conservation, go into wildlife and fisheries, go into animal science. And they love it. They love it. They want to do it. This summer, one of them was a seasonal park ranger at the Tennessee State Parks. They love what they do. They just want to have joy in it. Y'all love it. They want it, and they love it too, and they just want to be accepted. They want to be welcome, supported in what they do and what they love. And then I just think about where we are, and they're educators as well. Like, they want to educate other people and share what they do. And then they also, at the application, they want to show them. And I always tell my students, it's education and application. Now, get the education, get the awareness, and then actually help and teach and show and do what you love to do. And so I think it's just about joy. They want to experience that joy that you all experience as well. I think that's why we do it too, because it's just the joy. There's a joy, a healing in nature, and I think everyone deserves to have that.
So the session ends at 12. However, who wants to push, we'll push till about 12:10, and we'll do some Q&A. We should maybe circulate a microphone around the room. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been informative. We work in the Grand Canyon on the river, so it's but the geography of the canyon means that we do multi-day trips. So it's a very remote area, many days at a time with the same group of people. No cell service. So it has a couple of effects. That means a lot of our clientele are mostly white, close to or have been retired, because it's cost prohibitive by the time you get to that. And we charge the least we sustainably can. But that also means that it's kind of the similar thing for our guides. Like, it's a remote area in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of white people. And then a side effect of that is that most of our visual media, marketing, website, all that shows who's there, which is mostly white people. So my question is, and Alex, you kind of touched on this a bit, was what avenues or methods can we use to attract a more diverse applicant pool? Because we would love to have a more diverse client and employee base, but attracting that has been the hard part. We can only hire from who comes to us, and that's what we want to know, is how can we bring them to us? Or what avenues can we reach out to encourage them to apply?
Yeah, so a couple things, I'll be quick. From my perspective, I think that it's really, really important to, well, one, you have a great brand in the Grand Canyon. Most people know about that, so you can attract that. I think it's important as y'all guide. I know it's tricky because, as you're guiding, you're not potentially trying to have social political discussions, well, yeah, let's talk about all these really heavy things, but also maybe some pushes, because you would be surprised at how many times. So one organization I'm a part of, is quick side note, WildGive. They work with environmental entrepreneurs and get them connected to spaces in Idaho. And one of the things that they're intentionally doing is, with their donors, they'll go out and take them to these places, and they'll say, hey, you paid for us to guide you here. We want to take people that can't afford to do this, right? And so literally some of those people will pay it's just an extra $50 or extra $100. So they essentially have a sliding scale method that they have, and that provides extra money and cost to do the marketing to take smaller groups. So I think one thing I would say twofold. One, consider that, is there opportunity to work with some of the folks who are already going there? Because they probably would want other people to see those places, especially when we think about elders in our community. They're thinking about the next generation, right? We want to steward those places. And then the second thing is, I think it's okay to start small. So, y'all run multi-day trips, but I would encourage y'all, it might just start with a day trip with the Boys and Girls Club. Be like, hey, we just want to get y'all for a day. This is our non-busy season. Y'all want to come hang out for the day? We're going to work with Las Vegas or somebody like that, and work with the Boys and Girls Club, get them out for a day, and not tokenize their marketing, but hear about their experience and see it as a listening experience potentially, and that could you extrapolate from there.
And I'm just going to add one quick thing. When you work with the Boys and Girls Club, whoever it is, or Outdoor Afro, whoever it is, like someone that's doing similar things, maybe not quite rafting for multi-days, but similar things, being able to bring their leadership in too, so that the kids are seeing themselves reflected in who they're going to go hang out with no cell service in the middle of nowhere. Because that's like, I want to encourage, I really appreciate that you noticed that, and you're recognizing that, because I want to encourage everyone to ask yourself, how often am I the only person from my ethnicity or my race when I walk into a room, right? Or when I walk into a hunting camp or backpacking, whatever. So that's something that we've all thought of at some point. It's like, ooh, I'm the only Native American I can see right now, and that happens to us. And so if y'all are thinking about that also, that's going to be really beneficial. How can you bring leaders, aunties, uncles in to help with those trips?
Next, someone else have a question? We're going to do rapid fire.
So the organization I work for is Wildwater. We do rafting, zip lining, lodging, that sort of stuff in the Southeast, multiple locations. We have folks of color that work for us that are trip leaders, that are in leadership positions with us and have been with us for 5, 6, 7 years. And we have that trust there. But what I am starting to see is that through this conversation that's been popping up the last couple of years, we've been asking more of them to speak towards our company or our industry. And I'm nervous that it's going to go too far at some point. And so I'm just wondering if there's any advice that you guys have of how do we have that conversation of what is too far and what is okay in, marketing who they are and what our company is trying to do.
I have some thoughts on that. First off, thanks for acknowledging that. The past couple of years have been some of the most exhausting years for people of color across many industries. But in this space, we're often, in settings like this, we get paid to speak on a panel. In our respective jobs and workforces, if you're not the leader of your organization, you're often called on to do the marketing for the organization and do the social media and do the community outreach. And often those job tasks are in addition to what all else you're carrying. So even just starting with the acknowledgement of what people of color on your staff are carrying for the organization is most critical. Keeping it balanced, getting consent, not only consent, but assent, that they are actually wanting to do that work, really understanding what is a space that they want to hold. Not everyone wants to be on a panel talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a different type of work. Some folks just want to work behind the scenes, and that will also speak for itself as well for your organization. Not everything has to be a marketing push. So I would say, balance and getting their consent and having those in-depth conversations. I'll never forget, to give a direct example, my last job with Outdoor Outreach. It was a white-founded, white-led organization. I was the associate executive director, and I was in that exact position, right? And I'll never forget the time that I sat down with Ben, and Alex has met Ben, and we just had a candid conversation. He was like, I know the time and space that we're in right now. It's 2020, and you're being pulled in all of these different directions, and also you've been a huge benefit to the organization as well. Just speaking transparently and candidly, we discussed how to redesign my job position to then take on the responsibilities that I really enjoyed doing, including some of that front-facing work. He increased my salary. Let's talk candidly about that as well. And so, those are some of the acknowledgments that go a long way in saying, like, we get it. You're carrying more work, and acknowledging that it is work.
Cool. Thank you.
We'll do, Hillary, we'll do 3 more.
in southwestern Oregon, and he had gotten up one morning early to go for a run, and on the trail met with a white man who said, "You shouldn't be out here alone. You, as an African American, will scare women if they see you." And he said, "I'm not an African American, I'm an African." Person said, "Same thing," and so he knew right there. But then the man said, "And it also isn't safe for you," with a real strong implication. So my question is, how do I help protect, I mean, your thing about like make it safe, and I felt when I heard this story, I felt very helpless and out of control as to what to do to improve that situation. And he never went for a run again.
So sorry, like I don't want to laugh, but I have to because like as a black man, like sometimes like so you're like walking in the grocery store and you walk past a car and you see the lock go down. Somebody like you walk and go to a store and then you like click, and you're like, I'm just trying to go get my Kroger run or whatever. I'm like, bro, I'm like trying to get you. But anyways, like that's just the reality of like, you know, how we look. You know, people, it scares some people. I think it's like, you know, educating the community. So I think like as outfitters, like your outfitting space is one space, but it's the broader community that needs to be educated too. So I think it's by talking to your elected leaders, talking to various nonprofits, and kind of setting up this kind of like, I'm calling it like this destination community education program around equity and inclusion to make these towns more, or these trail spaces more inclusive and equitable and stuff like that. So that's one mechanism I think is kind of creating like a community-wide program to do that.
I'll add and echo that. Yeah, as a black man, that's our everyday reality. Yeah, hands down. I think in addition to doing, sometimes also just being with is one of the most important things. Like empathizing, it's uncomfortable. I'm a doer. When my girlfriend starts crying about something, I immediately want to fix it, and she tells me like, sometimes you don't have to fix it. I just want you to know that I'm seen. And so I would say the same thing in that scenario as well. Like sometimes just empathizing, racism is still real in this world. And we have to navigate it every single day. But to know that we have at least one safe person that's like, that was fucked up. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. Let's sit and talk about it. Let's go for lunch. Goes such a long way in just allowing us to feel seen and valued in this space. So, yeah, I'll just say that.
And then I just want to add to when you say like being with, that's something that I want to encourage anyone who is, I mean, even myself, anyone who's more white passing, anyone who's more light skin, we have a privilege and we have an opportunity to also, you know, it was driving me crazy during 2020, all the like, I don't understand, but I stand, like that kind of thing. Because what does that even mean unless you're doing something? What does the action look like? And so like offer to go for a jog with him. Like be the white person who is there in Oregon, which is like one of the most racist states in the nation. From there, so I can speak to it. But offer to be there and offer that. I mean, you're offering privilege when you offer to be that person who goes on a jog or goes on a walk or whatever it is. And that can go for any of you, any time. You know, don't let that bad thing happen to that person because of, and like know the history is what Jerry was saying too. Like know the history of the state of Oregon and where you are, and when you should be really thoughtful about that safety in numbers.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Just like wrap it up. I think it's all, so as much as I was like, you go to all these amazing, beautiful places, right? Let's acknowledge where some of these beautiful places are, right? And so I also think it's important to do some of the proactive work around safety. And so I'm not saying y'all didn't do that, but also like thinking like for some of y'all that are in these spaces, like in Idaho, like Oregon, and knowing that like racism can happen anywhere. I mean, it happened at my grocery store on the Northwest side. You know, I was called the N-word, and I was just like shopping for groceries. I was like, what? So it can happen anywhere, but sometimes it potentially could happen more, and it's more exacerbated if you're in the outdoors trying to heal or trying to just run, and those things happen. So with that, I think it's important to do some of the proactive work. By proactive work, I mean, Wild Gift's a perfect example. In Idaho, they are very intentional about, okay, we're going to stop. We know these towns very well. I live in this town. Not that anything can happen, but I know for the most part, like, I know this shop owner. I know his heart, and I know he wouldn't say something like that, right? So I worked with another camp in Texas, and they were super intentional when staff went out there. Like, here are the 4 places we recommend that you go. They're great. Here's the owners. They're going to come in, speak to y'all. You can hang out there. This is the bar you can go to, and during the off time, right? It's great. The bar owner knows us. Say you know Jeff, right, in there. Like, those things. And so doing some of the proactive work to cultivate relationships in those communities in some of these remote places where if you're bringing in staff of color, they will be safe and they will be heard. There's no way you're going to be able to solve for all those issues, but some of that can go a long way that when they come in, and not make it weird, but like come in and be like, hey, here's 3 places that we know them very well, we recommend you go there. If something does happen, please let us know. And figuring out some ways, during your off season to potentially advocate and push against some of that.
Yeah, well, thank y'all so much for your time with this panel, or listening to us. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, American Outdoors, for having us. And I'm just going to do a shameless plug, like, love for all of y'all here to be, learn about all these different groups, the Multicultural Affairs Office, University of Tennessee, Hunters of Color, Green Youth Foundation, Black Outside, and then Together Outdoors. We have a lot of cool projects and toolkits and stuff that y'all can plug into, but thank y'all for being here. We appreciate it.
Let's thank our panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. This was very informative. I hope you're all taking good notes. Next up, we've got lunch in the expo, so go hang out. I think some or most of them are also going to be hanging for a bit, so if you want to come find them near the couches, they would love to chat with you. Thanks, everyone.